The February air in Houston was cold enough to see your breath. I was standing on the steps of City Hall in my dress uniform medals lined up across my chest, service stripes on my sleeve. 10 years of everything I had survived pressed into fabric and brass. People walked past me without a second glance. Just another soldier. Just another Tuesday. Then the doors opened, and I heard his voice through the speakers. My sister, Kezia, gave her life for this country. She didn't make it back, but her sacrifice lives on through me. I stopped breathing for exactly 3 seconds. My name is Kezia Washington, and I was standing 20 feet from the man who had spent 10 years telling the world I was dead. My brother Damon had built his entire political career on my uniform, my name, and a story he invented while I was still breathing overseas, still writing letters home, still calling a grandmother who never stopped waiting. For 10 years, he accepted applause for grieving me. For 10 years, I didn't know. That afternoon, in front of city officials, community leaders, and every person who had ever clapped for him, I walked through those doors. But before I tell you what happened when 200 people turned around and saw me standing there in that uniform, let me take you back to a house in Acres Homes, Houston, and a family that decided, before I was old enough to understand it, that I was the wrong shade, the wrong child, and the wrong kind of daughter to love out loud. Before I do, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back to where it all started. The house on Acorn Creek Drive sat on the west side of Houston in a neighborhood called Acres Homes. It was not a fancy street. The sidewalks cracked in the summer heat and buckled again every winter. The oak trees were old and heavy roots pushing up through the concrete like they were trying to escape. Most of the houses had been there since the 60s, small solid built by Black families who had scraped and saved and planted themselves into that ground when the rest of Houston wasn't open to them. Big Mama Odessa had lived on that street for 52 years. She owned the house outright. She owned the lot beside it too. In a neighborhood where most people rented and most landlords didn't live within 20 miles, that meant something. The Washington family gathered there every summer, every Thanksgiving, every Easter Sunday after church. That house was the center of everything. I grew up 2 miles away in a rental on Wheatley Street. There were 4 of us, my mother Rochelle, my father Curtis, my brother Damon, and me. Damon was 4 years older. He was lighter-skinned, what the older women in our family called bright. My mother's complexion. People noticed it immediately, the way people in certain Black families always notice, always comment, always rank. Rochelle had smooth caramel skin and what the church ladies called good hair, loose waves she set every Saturday night before service. Damon inherited all of it. I got my father's coloring, deep brown, warm, and dark. Curtis Washington was a beautiful man, broad-shouldered, quiet, with hands that could fix anything. But in our family, his complexion was treated like something to apologize for. Not out loud. Never out loud, just in the small, continuous ways that accumulate over a childhood until they become the air you breathe. When I was 7 years old, my Aunt Brenda Rochelle's sister looked at a photo of Damon and me and said, "Lord Rochelle, Damon got your color and Kezia got all of Curtis's." She laughed when she said it, like it was an observation about the weather. Rochelle laughed too. Curtis was in the other room. I was standing right there. I didn't understand what was wrong with what they said. I just understood that something was. The way you understand a room has gotten colder before you can name the feeling. My mother worked as a nurse at a clinic off West Little York Road. She was good at her job, organized, efficient, never late. At home, she ran the household the same way, schedules, expectations, everything in its place. She was not a woman who raised her voice often. She didn't need to. Rochelle Washington communicated preference through attention, and she had made her preferences clear from the time Damon and I were small. Damon's school projects went on the refrigerator. Mine went in a drawer. Damon's report cards got read out loud at the dinner table. Mine got a nod. When Damon made the junior varsity basketball team at age 13, Rochelle called Big Mama Odessa called, Aunt Brenda called 3 women from church. There was a small celebration that Friday. Nothing big, just family, just fried chicken and sweet tea, and everybody telling Damon how proud they were. The following spring, I was selected for the district science fair. I placed second in the entire region. I was 12 years old. I brought the ribbon home on a Tuesday afternoon and set it on the kitchen counter. Rochelle glanced at it, said, "Good job, baby," and asked me to start the rice. I started the rice. I told myself it didn't matter. I was good at telling myself that. My father Curtis drove long-haul routes Houston to El Paso, Houston to Memphis sometimes, as far as Atlanta. He was home about 10 days a month, sometimes less. When he was home, he was gentle with me, in the quiet way of a man who sees more than he says. He taught me how to change a tire when I was 10. He let me ride in the cab of his truck once all the way to Beaumont and back, just the two of us, the radio on low, the highway unfurling ahead of us, like a question neither of us needed to answer. But Curtis Washington did not confront Rochelle, not about Damon, not about anything. He was a man who kept peace the way some people keep debt by never looking directly at how much had accumulated. I understood it even then. I just wish sometimes that he had looked. The clearest picture I have of how my family worked came from the summer I was 14. It was the annual family reunion held as always at Big Mama Odessa's house on Acorn Creek Drive. Cousins from Beaumont, from Port Arthur, from as far as Dallas made the drive. Big Mama Odessa cooked for 3 days beforehand. Her kitchen smelled like smothered chicken and cornbread, and the particular sweetness of her peach cobbler cooling on the counter. Folding tables stretched across the backyard. The older men set up dominoes under the oak tree. The children ran through the sprinklers in the side yard. Damon had just been accepted into the pre-college summer program at Prairie View A&M University, a prestigious 6-week intensive for high school juniors. Rochelle had arranged his acceptance like a campaign, calling the program director twice, paying the application fee before he'd even agreed to apply. That reunion was effectively his announcement party. Rochelle set up a table with his acceptance letter framed in a wooden frame she'd bought from a craft store. She printed a banner. She actually printed a banner that read "Future Aggie" in purple and gold. Family members circled Damon for the better part of 2 hours. Every aunt, every uncle, every cousin twice removed wanted to shake his hand, hug his neck, tell him he was going places. I spent that reunion in Big Mama Odessa's kitchen, washing dishes and refilling the lemonade pitcher and carrying plates back and forth from the folding tables. Not because anyone asked me to, because it was the only role available, and I had learned early to make myself useful when I couldn't make myself seen. It was Big Mama Odessa who found me there, elbow deep in soapy water, about 2 hours in. She didn't say anything right away. She just picked up a dish towel and stood beside me and started drying. For a long moment, the only sounds were the water running and the muffled noise of the reunion outside. Then she said, "You know what I see when I look at you, baby?" I shook my head. "I see somebody they keep trying to put in the back room." She set down the plate she was drying. "Don't you stay back here! You hear me? Don't you let them make you small!" I was 14. I didn't fully know what to do with that. But I held on to it the way you hold on to something you're not ready to use yet, carefully in both hands in the dark. I didn't know it then. But that summer would be the last time I felt like I had a place in that family, and the first time I understood that Big Mama Odessa saw something in me that nobody else in that house was willing to look at. The year I turned 17, I decided I was going to college. Not because anyone encouraged me. Not because Rochelle sat me down and talked about applications and deadlines and financial aid the way I had watched her sit Damon down 2 years before. I decided because I had spent 3 years watching what happened when a Washington child was deemed worthy of investment, and I wanted that. Not the attention, not the celebration, just the actual thing. The education, the door it opened, the life on the other side of it. I researched on my own. I stayed after school and used the computer lab because our home internet was slow and Rochelle's laptop was always occupied. I talked to my guidance counselor, Mrs. Tatum, a small, quiet woman who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and who in 3 years was the only adult at that school who ever asked me what I wanted to do with my life. "Texas Southern," I told her. "They have a strong biology program. I want to go pre-med." She looked at me over her glasses. "You have the grades for it." I did. I had a 3.8 GPA. I had never missed a semester honor roll. I had done all of it without tutors, without test prep courses, without anyone checking my homework at the kitchen table. Damon, by comparison, had graduated Prairie View's summer program with a certificate and a 2.9 GPA, and Rochelle had framed that certificate and hung it in the living room next to his junior year school portrait. My honor roll certificates were in a folder in my bedroom closet. I had put them there myself. Texas Southern University accepted me in March of my senior year. It was a full acceptance, not a waitlist, not a provisional admit. A real acceptance letter with my name on it to an HBCU in the heart of Houston's 3rd Ward, 4 miles from Big Mama Odessa's house. The financial aid package covered most of it. Most. There was a gap of $3,000 per year that the package didn't touch. $3,000. I waited for the right evening, a Friday Curtis home from a run, everyone at the dinner table, and I laid out the letter, the financial aid summary, and a 1-page breakdown I had written myself, showing exactly what I needed and exactly how I had calculated it. Rochelle looked at the papers for perhaps 45 seconds. "We don't have it," she said. "Damon still needs his monthly while he finishes up at Prairie View." I looked at my father. Curtis set down his fork. He looked at the table. "Damon's allowance is $300 a month," I said. "That's $3,600 a year. That's more than my gap." The kitchen went very quiet. Rochelle folded the papers back toward me with 2 fingers, the way you slide something across a table that you've already decided doesn't belong to you. "That's not the same thing," she said. "Damon is establishing himself. You'll figure something out. You always do." "You'll figure something out. You always do." I had heard that sentence or versions of it my entire life. Said like a compliment. Said like it meant I was capable, self-sufficient, strong. But what it actually meant in every context Rochelle used, it was this: "We have decided not to help you, and we are going to frame that decision as faith in your abilities." I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. $3,000. I could have taken out a private loan. I could have worked 2 jobs through college. I had done the math on that too. And it was possible, barely, if I took a lighter course load and pushed graduation back by a year. I could have gone to a community college, first transferred later, lost time, but saved money. I spent 2 weeks turning over every option. Then I sat back down at the school computer lab and pulled up a different website entirely, the United States Army recruitment page. I want to be honest about what that decision felt like. It did not feel like patriotism. It did not feel like calling. It felt like a door that was open when every other door had been closed locked, or simply never mentioned to me. The Army would pay for my education. The Army would give me housing training, a salary, and a future that did not require Rochelle Washington's signature on a check. I enlisted in July of that year. I told my parents on a Tuesday evening after dinner. Rochelle's response was immediate and revealing. "The Army?" She set down her glass. "Why you always gotta do things the hard way? Damon would never put himself through something like that." "Not are you sure? Not is there another option? Not let us help you find a way. Just why can't you be more like your brother?" Curtis said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked at me, really looked at me the way he rarely allowed himself to, and said quietly, "You be safe, Kezia girl." That was it. That was the entirety of the support I received from my parents upon learning their daughter was joining the military. Big Mama Odessa, when I told her 2 days later, pulled me into her arms without a word. She held on for a long time. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "You are not running away," she said. It wasn't a question. She was telling me. You are running toward. There's a difference. Don't you ever let anybody tell you different? The morning of my departure. August 19th, 2014, I was due at the recruitment station on Antoine Drive at 7 in the morning for transport to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic combat training. I had asked carefully and without pressure whether anyone wanted to come. Rochelle said she had a morning shift. Curtis was already on a run to Memphis. He had left 2 days before my departure date. I found out later that the run wasn't scheduled. He had picked it up voluntarily. Damon didn't respond to my text at all. Not that day. Not the day before. I checked my phone twice in the car on the way to the station, then put it face down on the seat and left it there. The recruitment station waiting room had fluorescent lighting and plastic chairs and a vending machine with a broken selection panel. 11 other recruits sat in those chairs with their bags between their feet, most of them with at least one family member beside them. A mother gripping her son's hand. A father standing with his arms folded, jaw tight, trying not to cry. A grandmother older than Big Mama Odessa, moving slowly with a cane, who had somehow made it there to see her grandson off, and was now pressing a folded paper into his hands and talking low into his ear. I sat alone in the second row. At 6:47 in the morning, a car pulled up outside. I recognized it immediately, the 1998 Buick Lisabari that Big Mama Odessa had driven since before I was born, the one with the cracked left taillight and the pine tree air freshener hanging from the mirror. She came through the door, moving slowly, one hand on her cane, a brown paper bag in the other. She had woken up before dawn, cooked, packed the bag, and taken a taxi from Acres Homes across the city because she didn't trust herself to drive that far in the early morning. She sat down in the chair beside me without a word, set the bag in my lap. Inside a foil-wrapped biscuit, a container of her homemade pepper jelly, and a small worn Bible, with my name written on the inside cover in her careful looping handwriting. To my warrior, come back whole. I kept that Bible in my kit bag for 10 years, through Fort Jackson, through Fort Hood, through 2 deployments and 14 months in Germany, and every dark night in between when I needed to remember that at least one person in this world had shown up. When the transport bus pulled away 40 minutes later, I watched Big Mama Odessa through the window. She was still sitting in that plastic chair, both hands on her cane, watching the bus until it turned the corner. The worst part wasn't leaving alone. It was what I found out months later that Damon had started saying after I was gone. The first year I wrote letters, not emails, letters handwritten on plain white paper folded into envelopes I bought at the PX on base. I wrote to Big Mama Odessa every 2 weeks without fail. I told her about basic training at Fort Jackson, the 4:30 wake-ups, the drill sergeants, the particular exhaustion of your body doing things your mind hadn't agreed to yet. I told her about the women in my unit, a girl from Shreveport named Adrienne, who could run 3 miles faster than anyone in our company and braided my hair on Sunday evenings in the barracks. I told her about the moment I qualified expert on the rifle range and stood there in the South Carolina heat feeling something I didn't have a word for, yet something adjacent to pride, but larger, more structural, like a foundation being poured. Big Mama Odessa wrote back every single time. Her handwriting was large and slightly unsteady. Her arthritis had been worsening since she turned 75, but her words were precise. She told me about the neighborhood, about church, about her garden. She always ended the same way, still praying, still watching, still here. I called home when I could. The calls to Rochelle were short, 3 minutes, sometimes 4. She would give me a brief update. The house was fine. Curtis was on a run. Damon was doing well at Prairie View. Then a pause. Then, you staying safe? And, before I could answer fully, all right, I'll talk to you soon. I told myself it was just how Rochelle was. Efficient, not cold efficient. I had been telling myself that my entire life. The first time I heard something was wrong, I was at Fort Hood 8 months into my first stateside posting after basic. 2015. I had just come off a 72-hour field exercise and was sitting on my bunk checking my phone for the first time in 3 days. There was a message from a cousin, a distant one, Rochelle's side, a girl named Tanya. I had spoken to maybe twice in my life. Hey, Kezia. Just wanted to say we heard about you. Rest easy, cuz. You will be missed. I stared at the screen. I typed back, I'm not dead, Tanya. I'm at Fort Hood. She never responded. I called Rochelle that evening. She picked up on the 4th ring. Mama, I said, people think I'm gone. Tanya just sent me a condolence message. What is going on? A pause, long enough to be deliberate. You know how people talk, Rochelle said. Damon mentioned something at church about you being overseas, and somebody must have taken it the wrong way. I'll clear it up. She did not clear it up. I know this because the messages kept coming, not many and not often, but enough. A cousin who sent a prayer emoji without explanation. An old classmate from high school who posted on my Facebook while thinking of you and your family, Kezia, true hero. I was alive and logged into the same account. I commented back, I'm doing fine still here. The comment got 2 likes and no response. It was as if the world had decided on a version of my story and found my corrections inconvenient. What I didn't know then, what I pieced together slowly over years through Big Mama Odessa's letters and careful listening, was that Damon had not made a single offhand comment at church that someone misunderstood. He had built a narrative, deliberately, incrementally, the way you build anything that's meant to last. It started with sympathy. Damon had ambitions in Houston's political community. He had his eye on a district advisory board seat, then a city council run, then higher. He was charming and articulate and light-skinned and well-dressed, and he understood instinctively that Houston's Black political landscape responded to story, to sacrifice, to the language of community and legacy and what we owe each other. So he found his story in me. At a church fundraiser in 2015, he spoke about the weight of watching a sibling choose service over safety. By 2016, I had become in his telling someone who had deployed under dangerous conditions and about whom the family received uncertain news. By 2017, at a campaign kickoff event for his first city council run, he stood at a podium in a rented banquet hall in the 3rd Ward and said with his hand over his heart and his voice dropping just low enough to signal grief, "My sister my sister Kezia, she gave everything. We don't always get our people back." Applause, donation checks. A profile in the Houston Defenders Community Spotlight section in Damon Washington Rising Voice, driven by family sacrifice. Rochelle was quoted in that profile. "We're so proud of Damon. He's kept her memory alive." Big Mama Odessa read that profile on a Wednesday morning at her kitchen table and called me that same afternoon. "Baby," she said. Her voice was quieter than usual. Careful. "I need you to know what's happening at home, because nobody else is going to tell you." She read me the quotes. She read me Damon's exact words from the fundraiser. She had been to that event, had sat in the back of the room and listened and said nothing because she needed to understand the full shape of what was happening before she acted. "He's using your name like you're a ghost," she said. "Every time he says it, you get a little more buried, and your mama's sitting right there letting it happen." I was in my barracks room at Fort Hood. It was 11 at night. I sat on the edge of my bunk and held the phone against my ear and felt something very cold move through me. Not rage, not yet, but the precursor to it. The recognition, the understanding of what had been built in my absence and why. "What do I do?" I asked. "Right now," Big Mama Odessa said. "Nothing. You finish your service, you come home whole. But I'm going to start keeping a record of everything he says and everywhere he says it. Because the truth needs witnesses, baby. And I am going to be one." That was the beginning of what I later came to think of as Big Mama Odessa's archive. Over the next several years, she kept a folder, an actual physical manila folder, thick with clippings and printouts and handwritten notes. Every newspaper article that mentioned Damon's fallen sister. Every church bulletin where he was listed as a speaker and the program noted his personal loss. Every screenshot a church friend sent her of Damon's Facebook posts, including the one from 2019, when he posted a photograph of me in my Army combat uniform, lifted directly from my own Facebook page without permission, with the caption, "In honor of my sister Kezia Washington. Gone, but never forgotten. Everything I do is for her." That post received 412 likes. I was stationed in Germany when it went up. It was 2019. I had been in the Army for 5 years. I was preparing for my second deployment. Big Mama Odessa saw the post within an hour and called me immediately. "He put your picture up, baby, in uniform, said you were gone." I pulled up the post on my phone, read it once, looked at the comments, people calling Damon an inspiration, calling me a hero, calling the family strong. I looked at my own face in that photograph. Younger early in my service, standing straight in my uniform outside the barracks at Fort Jackson. I looked proud in that photo. I had been proud of the work of myself, of what I was building. He had taken that and made it a monument to a lie. I said to Big Mama Odessa, "Keep the folder." She said, "Already am." Then she said something that I carried with me through the remainder of my service, through 2 more years overseas, through every night I thought about coming home and what that would mean. "I talked to my lawyer last month," she said. "Got some things in order. The land, the house, it goes to the ones who showed up. And baby, you are the only one who ever did." I didn't fully understand what she meant that night. 3 years later, I would. Big Mama Odessa told me she was keeping a record of everything. "When the time comes," she said, "the truth won't need you to fight for it. It'll speak for itself." I held on to those words for 3 more years. And in the quiet of a Stuttgart apartment 4,000 miles from Houston, I made a decision that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life being someone's eulogy. I landed at Houston Hobby Airport on a Thursday evening in January 2024. The terminal was loud and warm after 14 hours of travel. Stuttgart to Frankfurt to Atlanta to Houston, each leg longer in the mind than on the clock. I had my duffel over one shoulder and my discharge papers in a folder inside my carry-on. Honorable discharge. Sergeant First Class. 10 years of service completed with a record I was not ashamed of. I stood at the baggage carousel and watched suitcases circle and thought I am 30 years old, and I am starting over in the city where nobody came to say goodbye. Nobody came to say hello either. I had not told Rochelle or Curtis my arrival date. I had not told Damon. The only person who knew I was coming, the only person who had known my flight number, my layover times the color of my duffel bag, was Big Mama Odessa. She had called me 3 days before departure. Her voice thinner than I remembered, but still carrying that particular quality of hers, the one that made every sentence sound like a verdict that had already been reached. "Baby," she said, "I need you to come home. Not next month, now." "What's wrong?" A pause. "My heart's been giving me trouble. Doctor says I need to slow down." Another pause. "And there's something else. Damon's got a promotion ceremony coming up. February 14th, City Hall. Whole community's going to be there." Her voice dropped slightly. "He's going to stand up at that podium and talk about you again. I need you to be in that room when he does." I didn't ask why. I already knew why. "I'll be on the next available flight," I said. I had been back in Houston for 36 hours when I saw my mother for the first time in 6 years. It did not happen at the airport. It did not happen at a dinner table or a living room sofa with soft lighting and time set aside for the weight of the moment. It happened in a hospital corridor on the cardiac floor of Memorial Hermann on the West Loop under fluorescent lights, with the smell of antiseptic in the air and a nurse's station humming 20 feet away. Big Mama Odessa had been admitted 2 days before my arrival. Her cardiologist, a quiet, careful man named Dr. Achebe, had used the phrase significant deterioration in a way that left no room for optimism. I walked into that corridor with my duffel still over my shoulder. I had come directly from the airport, and there was Rochelle, standing outside Big Mama Odessa's room in her nurse's scrubs arms folded, looking at her phone. She looked up when I approached. 3 seconds. That was how long she looked at me before her eyes moved back to her phone. No embrace, no intake of breath, no "Kezia, baby, you're home." Nothing that acknowledged 6 years, 2 deployments, 10 years of service, or the particular silence that had existed between us since the night she slid my college acceptance papers back across the dinner table with 2 fingers. "You look tired," she said. "You should get some rest." I stood there for a moment with my duffel on my shoulder and my discharge folder in my bag, and 10 years of accumulated absence between us, and I understood with a clarity that was almost peaceful that Rochelle Washington was never going to be the first one to reach across that distance. Not tonight. Not in this corridor. Not ever unless something forced her hand. "I want to see Big Mama," I said. "She's resting." "I'll wait." I sat down in one of the plastic chairs along the wall. Rochelle went back to her phone. We sat 10 feet apart for 40 minutes without speaking. Then a nurse came out and said Big Mama Odessa was awake and asking for her granddaughter. And I went in. The room was dim. The equipment beeped in its slow metronomic way. Big Mama Odessa was propped up against 2 pillows, her white hair loose around her shoulders. I had never seen her hair down before. Always pinned up for church, always neat. It made her look smaller, more mortal, like the version of her that existed before she had decided to be formidable. But her eyes were sharp. They found me the moment I came through the door. "There she is," she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered, but the warmth in it that had not changed at all. I pulled the chair close and sat and took her hand. Her fingers were cool and her grip was lighter than it used to be, but she held on with intention. "You look like the army," she said. "I just got out of the army." She studied my face. "You look like yourself, too. Underneath it." She patted my hand once. "That's good. That's what matters." We talked for 40 minutes. About the hospital, about Dr. Achebe, about the neighbor who had been bringing her groceries for the past month, and the church deacon who had organized a meal train. She hadn't asked for but appreciated. She was matter-of-fact about her own condition in the way of someone who has made a separate peace with an outcome and is now only concerned with the remaining logistics. Then she told me about Damon's ceremony, February 14th, Houston City Hall. A formal promotion event, Damon had been elevated to a senior management position in the city's Office of Economic Development, a role with political visibility and a salary that came with the kind of title that looked well on campaign materials. The mayor's office had co-sponsored the event. Councilwoman Yvette Chambers would be presenting. Community leaders, church representatives, local business owners, 200 people expected. "He's been talking about you in the run-up already," Big Mama Odessa said. "Jade Ellison at the Houston Defender did a preview piece last week. He gave a quote. Said you were the reason he does what he does." She paused. "Said you didn't make it back." I looked at the window. The Houston skyline was a faint glow beyond the glass. "He's going to say it again at the ceremony," Big Mama Odessa said. "In front of all those people." In front of Yvette Chambers and the mayor's representative and everybody who's ever written him a check or said a prayer for his fallen sister. She looked at me steadily. "I need you to be in that room, baby. Not to make a scene, not to destroy him, just to be there. Because a lie only lives as long as nobody shows up with the truth." I looked at her hand in mine. Her knuckles were swollen with arthritis. The same hands that had dried dishes beside me at the kitchen sink when I was 14. The same hands that had pressed a worn Bible into my lap in a recruitment station waiting room at 6:47 in the morning and held on longer than was necessary. "I'll be there," I said. I did not see Damon during those first days back in Houston. He came to the hospital once I knew, because a nurse mentioned it to Big Mama Odessa while I was in the room. He had stayed for 20 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon, during the one window I had stepped out to eat something from the cafeteria downstairs. 20 minutes, then he had a meeting. Big Mama Odessa didn't say anything about it directly. She just looked at me with an expression I recognized from childhood, the one that meant, "You see this. You see exactly what this is." I saw it. That same afternoon in the cafeteria, I called Sergeant Major Terrence Miles. Terrence had been my most trusted colleague across 3 years at Fort Hood, a broad-shouldered man from Birmingham with a 22-year career and a laugh that filled any room he walked into. He had been the first person I told years ago about what Damon was doing. He had listened without interrupting and then said, "When you're ready to handle it, I'll be standing right beside you." "Terrence," I said, "I need you in Houston on February 14th, full dress uniform." "A beat? What are we walking into?" "A ceremony," I said, "my brother's. He's going to tell 200 people that I died in service of this country. And I need 200 people to see what 10 years of service actually looks like, in person." A long pause. "I'll book the flight tonight," Terrence said. That night, sitting in a plastic chair outside Big Mama Odessa's hospital room at 11 o'clock, the corridor quiet and the equipment beeping its slow rhythm through the closed door, I made up my mind. Not out of anger, out of something quieter and more permanent than anger. Out of the knowledge that I had spent 30 years being made invisible by my family by a lie, by my own silence, and that February 14th was going to be the last day any of that was true. 3 days before February 14th, Big Mama Odessa took a turn. Dr. Achebe used the phrase "acute episode" in the hallway outside her room at 2:17 in the morning. His voice careful, and even the way doctors speak when they are telling you something serious and need you to remain functional enough to hear it. Her heart had gone into an irregular rhythm. They had stabilized her. She was resting. But the episode had clarified what the previous weeks had only suggested Big Mama Odessa was not going to recover. She was going to have more time or less time, but the direction was no longer in question. I called Rochelle from the waiting room at 2:30 in the morning. She arrived 40 minutes later. She came in and went directly to the nurse's station without looking for me in the waiting room, even though I was the only person sitting there. I called Damon at 2:32. His phone rang 7 times and went to voicemail. I texted Big Mama had a cardiac episode tonight. She's stable. You should come. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Then his reply came through. "I have a 7 in the morning breakfast with the deputy mayor tomorrow. Can you handle it?" I read that message once. I set my phone face down on the plastic chair beside me. I sat in that waiting room until 4 in the morning, when a nurse came out and said Big Mama Odessa was asking for me. I went in. She was pale and smaller looking than she had been even 2 days ago, but her eyes were open, and her hand when I took it still had that grip of intention. "I heard him," she said. She meant Damon. She didn't need to explain. "Big Mama, don't." She shook her head once. Don't explain him to me. I have known that boy his whole life. She looked at me steadily. You still going on the 14th? Yes. Good. She reached toward the nightstand with her free hand, slowly, carefully. I leaned over and opened the drawer for her. Inside was a manila envelope, thick, unsealed. She pushed it toward me. Lawyer has the original, she said. That's your copy. Don't open it yet. When you need it, you'll know. I took the envelope. I held it in both hands. It was heavier than it looked. Big Mama, what is, you'll know, she said again. And then she closed her eyes, not because she was finished with me, but because she was tired, and we had been speaking the same language our whole lives, and she trusted me to understand what she had already said. I sat beside her until she was asleep. Then I walked out into the corridor, envelope in hand, and stood under the fluorescent lights for a long moment. Rochelle was at the nurse's station speaking to someone in a low voice. She glanced at the envelope but said nothing. I went home to the small apartment I had rented in Midtown, the one Damon didn't know about, the one I had paid for with my own money and told no one in the family about except Big Mama Odessa. I set the envelope on the kitchen table. I did not open it. I went to sleep at 5 in the morning. The Houston Chronicle article appeared on February 11th, 3 days before the ceremony. I found it the way I found most things, that summer alone on my phone with no one beside me to say anything about it. I was eating breakfast at a McDonald's on Ella Boulevard, a place I had started going because it was far from the hospital and nobody I knew would see me there. And I needed sometimes 20 minutes of being completely anonymous in a city I had grown up in. The article was a feature piece, a full profile. Damon, Washington rising community leader, voice of Houston's 3rd Ward dedicated public servant. The journalist had spent time with him. There were quotes from colleagues, from church members, from a former professor at Prairie View. There was a photograph of Damon in front of City Hall, tie loosened slightly, looking thoughtfully into the middle distance, in the way that political photographs always arrange themselves. And then there was the section about me. I will quote it exactly as I remember it, because I have read it enough times that the words are as familiar to me now as my own name. My sister Kezia joined the Army because our family couldn't afford to send her to college, Washington said quietly. She never came home. I carry that every single day. Everything I do, every meeting, every decision, every morning I get up and put my shoes on, I do it for her. Beneath that quote, a caption under a photograph, Kezia Washington in uniform, who gave her life in service of her country. My photograph, my face, my uniform. Taken from my own Facebook page. Printed in the Houston Chronicle without my knowledge. My consent, or until that moment at a McDonald's on Ella Boulevard, my awareness. And beside that quote, a separate sidebar. A statement from my mother. We're so proud of Damon, said Patricia Rochelle Washington, Kezia's mother. He's kept her memory alive. She would have been so proud of the man her brother has become. I read the article once, twice, 3 times. The words did not change. My mother, the woman who had told me to figure it out, the woman who had spent 3 minutes on the phone with me from Bagram, the woman who had looked at me in a hospital corridor after 6 years and said, "You look tired." My mother had given a quote to the Houston Chronicle about keeping my memory alive while I was alive, 20 minutes away. So eating an egg biscuit at a McDonald's on Ella Boulevard with $17 in my wallet and an honorable discharge in my bag and a Bronze Star I had never told any of them about because there had never been a moment that felt safe enough to share it. I set my phone on the table. I looked out the window at the parking lot, at the cars coming and going, at the ordinary morning proceeding in its ordinary way outside the glass. Something cracked open inside me. Not broke, cracked open. The way a seed cracks open just before it becomes something else entirely. I'd spent 30 years being invisible in my own family. I had spent 10 years being turned into a ghost. And now I was sitting in a fast food restaurant reading my own eulogy in the city's newspaper of record while my brother prepared to accept applause for grieving me. I picked up my phone. I called Jade Ellison at the Houston Defender. Jade was a journalist I had researched carefully over the previous 2 weeks. She covered community politics, military affairs, and what she called the intersection of public image and private accountability. She had broken 2 stories in the past year about local officials misrepresenting their backgrounds for political gain. She was precise, thorough, and she answered her phone on the second ring. "Mrs. Ellison," I said. "My name is Kezia Washington. I'm the woman in the photograph in today's Houston Chronicle, the one who's supposed to be dead." A pause. "I'm not dead, and I think you might want to be at City Hall on February 14th with a camera." Silence on the other end. Then, "What time?" "2 in the afternoon," I said. "And Mrs. Ellison don't publish anything before then. I need you to see it happen in person." "I'll be there," she said. I ended the call. I finished my biscuit. I drove back to my apartment and opened the manila envelope Big Mama Odessa had given me. Inside was a copy of her will, dated September 2021, notarized, clear. The house on Acorn Creek Drive and the adjacent lot assessed together at $290,000, rising with the land values of a third ward that the rest of Houston had finally decided to pay attention to, were left in their entirety to Kezia Washington. Not split, not shared, entirely. The document included a handwritten addendum in Big Mama Odessa's large arthritic script to Rochelle and Damon. "I love you, but love is not the same as reward." Kezia showed up. The land goes to the one who showed up. I folded the document carefully, put it back in the envelope. I went to my closet. I took out my dress uniform still in its dry cleaning bag from Stuttgart. I hung it on the back of the door. 3 days. Something shifted inside me that night. Something that would never shift back. Terrence Miles landed at Houston Hobby on February 12th at 6 in the evening. I picked him up at the arrivals curb in my rental car, a gray Camry, nothing remarkable, the kind of car you drive when you don't want to be noticed. He came through the sliding doors in civilian clothes carry-on over one shoulder, and when he saw me, he did what Terrence always did. He looked at my face first, assessed the situation, and then smiled not broadly, but with the particular warmth of someone who has shared enough difficult ground with you that words have become optional. He got in the car. We drove. For the first 10 minutes, neither of us said anything meaningful. He asked about the weather. I asked about his flight. Then we stopped at a red light on the Gulf Freeway, and Terrence said without preamble, "Walk me through the whole thing." So I did, from the beginning. From the family reunion at Big Mama Odessa's house when I was 14, through the dinner table, and the college fund that wasn't through the recruitment station, and the bus pulling away, and the years of letters that went one direction more than the other, through the condolence message from Tanya, through Damon's campaign materials and the Houston Chronicle article, and the photograph of me in uniform printed under the words, "Gave her life." Terrence listened without interrupting. That was one of the things I had always trusted about him. He did not fill silence with reaction. He waited until you were finished. When I was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me on the 14th? "I need you to stand next to me," I said. "That's all, just stand there." He nodded slowly. "I can do that." The following morning, I drove to the offices of Hargrove and Associates on Westheimer Road, the law firm that handled Big Mama Odessa's estate. I met with her attorney, a careful silver-haired woman named Mrs. Patricia Okafor, who had represented Big Mama Odessa for 11 years, and who greeted me with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been expecting this meeting for some time. She confirmed everything in the envelope. The will was valid, properly notarized, filed with the Harris County Probate Court. Damon and Rochelle had not been notified of its contents. Big Mama Odessa had been explicit about that. The notification would come after her passing through proper legal channels. "Your grandmother was very clear about her intentions," Mrs. Okafor said. She folded her hands on the desk. "She was also very clear that she wanted you to have this information before the ceremony, so that you walked in knowing what you were walking toward, not just what you were walking away from." I sat with that for a moment. "The land value," I said, $290,000. "Is that current?" "That was the assessment from 18 months ago," Mrs. Okafor said. "Given recent development activity in Third Ward and the surrounding areas, the current market value is likely higher, closer to $320,000. She paused. "It is also, I should note, debt-free. Your grandmother paid off the mortgage in 2003. I thanked her. I shook her hand. I drove back to my apartment and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. $320,000 of land and history, and 52 years of a woman planting herself into a neighborhood and refusing to leave. And it was mine. Not because I had fought for it, not because I had demanded anything, but because I had shown up to hospital rooms, to recruitment stations, to every phone call and every letter, and she had seen me do it. That afternoon, I built the folder. I had been collecting the pieces for 2 weeks, but the act of assembling them into a single coherent document felt important, deliberate. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a printer I had bought at a Walmart on Westheimer, and I organized everything with the same methodical attention I had used for 10 years to prepare mission briefings. First, my military records, discharge papers, deployment records covering 2 tours, 14 months in Afghanistan, 9 months in Kuwait, commendation letters. My Bronze Star citation, awarded for actions during a convoy incident in Kandahar province in 2017 that I had never described to my family because there had been no one to describe it to. My Sergeant First Class promotion paperwork. Second, the evidence of what Damon had done. Printouts of his campaign materials featuring my photograph, screenshots of the Facebook post from 2019 with the timestamp, and the 412 likes. A printed copy of the Houston Chronicle article from February 11th with the relevant passages highlighted. The Houston Defender Community Spotlight from 2016. Big Mama Odessa's folder, every clipping, every church bulletins, every handwritten note she had kept across 8 years of careful, quiet witnessing. Third, a single clean cover page I had written myself. One paragraph, no emotion. Just facts, dates, and a straightforward account of what had been done with my name and my image without my knowledge or consent. I paper-clipped everything together. I put it in a fresh manila envelope. I wrote Councilwoman Yvette Chambers on the front. Then I visited Big Mama Odessa. She was having a better day. Sitting up. The color was slightly better in her face. She had asked the nurses to put her hair up, and she was wearing the pale yellow cardigan she kept at the hospital. Because she said the room was always cold. I sat beside her, and we talked for a long time, not about the ceremony, not about Damon, not about the will. We talked about her garden on Acorn Creek Drive, about the particular variety of tomatoes she grew along the back fence that she had never seen in any store, about the summer I was 8 years old and she had let me pick the peaches for her cobbler, and I had eaten almost as many as I put in the bowl, and she had pretended not to notice. She laughed at that memory, a real laugh, full and unhurried. After a while, she grew quiet and looked at me with that steady assessing look I had known my whole life. "You ready?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Not angry. I thought about it honestly. "No," I said, "not anymore." She nodded, satisfied. "Good." She patted my hand. "Don't go in there trying to burn something down, baby. Go in there whole. A whole woman doesn't need to destroy anybody. She just needs to stand up." I pressed her hand between both of mine. "When you come back," she said, "bring me some of that pepper jelly from the H-E-B on West Little York, the store brand, not the fancy kind." I laughed. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled, closed her eyes. I sat beside her until she fell asleep, the monitor beeping its slow, steady rhythm, the late afternoon light coming through the blinds in long flat lines across the floor. Then I drove home. I checked my dress uniform one more time, every medal seated correctly, every stripe aligned, every ribbon in its proper sequence. I set my alarm for 5 in the morning. February 14th arrived quiet and cold. I woke before the alarm. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and put on my uniform piece by piece. Every medal, every stripe, every ribbon I had earned across 10 years of service that my family had never asked about and my brother had buried under a lie. If Damon wanted to tell the world about my sacrifice, then the world was going to see exactly what that sacrifice looked like. In person, in uniform, alive. Houston City Hall sits on the corner of Walker and Bagby, a broad limestone building with tall windows, and the particular self-importance of civic architecture, built in an era when government wanted you to feel small by comparison. Terrence and I arrived at 1:52 in the afternoon. We parked 2 blocks away and walked. The February air was cold enough to be real, not the damp, uncertain cold that Houston usually produced, but something cleaner with an edge to it. Our breath showed briefly and disappeared. Our dress uniforms drew glances from people passing on the sidewalk. A man in a construction vest stopped and gave a small nod. A woman with a stroller slowed and looked at the medals on my chest with an expression I had learned to recognize, not quite recognition, but respect for something she understood was earned. I carried the manila envelope in my left hand. Terrence said nothing. He walked beside me at an even pace, shoulders back, eyes forward. That was enough. At the entrance, a young woman with a clipboard checked names against a guest list. She looked at us at the uniforms, at the medals, and her expression shifted from professional efficiency to something softer. "Are you on the list?" she asked. "We're guests of Councilwoman Chambers." Yeah, I said it was not untrue. Jade Ellison had made a quiet call to the councilwoman's office the previous morning, without revealing why, simply noting that 2 individuals in military dress uniform would be attending, and that the councilwoman would want to be aware of their presence. The councilwoman's aide had confirmed. The young woman with the clipboard waved us through. The hall was already full. 200 people, perhaps slightly more. Round tables draped in the city's colors. A podium at the front with a seal on the front face. Floral arrangements that cost more than my monthly barracks housing allowance. A banner across the back wall reading Excellence in Public Service, Houston Office of Economic Development. I stood at the back of the room for a moment and took it in. Jade Ellison was already there, positioned near the left wall, with a small camera bag over her shoulder and a press lanyard around her neck. She saw me the moment I entered. She did not react visibly, just held my gaze for 2 seconds, and gave the smallest nod. I found Rochelle and Curtis at a table in the front section. Rochelle was in a navy dress, her hair freshly done, sitting with the upright posture she always adopted at public events. The posture that said, "I belong here, and I know it." Curtis sat beside her in a dark suit that looked like it had been purchased recently. He was looking at his hands. Damon was at the front of the room near the podium, speaking to a man in a city official's lanyard, laughing at something. He was in a charcoal suit, deep blue tie pocket square, folded precisely. He looked polished, confident, entirely at ease in a room built around him. I watched him for a moment. He had not seen me yet. Terrence leaned slightly toward me and said quietly, "You good?" "Yes," I said. The program began at 2 o'clock exactly. A master of ceremonies, a city communications director named Mr. Eugene Pratt welcomed the room, acknowledged the mayor's representative, and introduced Councilwoman Yvette Chambers. The councilwoman spoke briefly about the Office of Economic Development, about community investment, about the kind of public servant Houston needed more of. Then she introduced Damon. Applause. Warm, genuine, the applause of a room that believed in the man it was clapping for. Damon walked to the podium with the ease of someone who had rehearsed this moment and knew exactly how it would feel. He gripped the edges of the lectern, looked out across 200 faces, and smiled. He thanked the mayor's office. He thanked Councilwoman Chambers. He talked about growing up in Houston, about the responsibility of public service, about what it meant to represent a community that had given him everything. And then his voice dropped, just slightly, the practiced drop that signals sincerity, the rhetorical gear shift I had watched him deploy in videos and articles, and now for the first time in person. "I also want to take a moment," he said, "to honor the person who made all of this possible for me. The person whose sacrifice I carry every single day." He paused. "My sister Kessia gave her life for this country. She didn't make it back, but her sacrifice lives on through me, through this work, through every decision I make in this role." He pressed his hand flat against his chest. "She is the reason I stand here." Applause began to build. I walked through the doors. Not quickly, not dramatically. I simply walked steady, even the way I had walked into every difficult room across 10 years of service. Terrence beside me, the envelope in my left hand, every medal on my chest catching the light of the hall. The sound reached the room before I did. Not a sound I made, the sound of 200 people noticing something at the same moment. A shift, a collective intake, heads turning from the back of the room forward like a wave moving toward the podium. I walked down the center aisle. Damon was still at the podium. I watched his face from 20 feet, then 15, then 10. He saw me at 12 feet. I watched it happen in real time, the precise sequence of a man's certainty collapsing. His eyes found my face. He blinked. His mouth was still open from the last word he had spoken. His hand was still pressed against his chest. He blinked again. The color left his face in stages. In first, The warmth went, then the confidence, then something underneath both of those things. Something structural, and what was left was an expression I had never seen on my brother's face in 31 years of knowing him. Fear. Pure, undecorated fear. A woman at a table near the aisle whispered something to the man beside her. I heard the words without fully registering them. Is she someone else said my name? Not Damon. Someone in the audience? Someone who recognized the uniform or the face from the photograph. They said Kezia in a tone that was equal parts disbelief and something approaching awe. The applause died. 200 people in complete silence. Rochelle had turned in her chair. Her face, I had imagined this moment more than once over the past 2 weeks, imagined what her expression would be. What I had not anticipated was how ordinary it would look. Not horror, not grief, not the theatrical collapse of a woman confronted with consequence. Just a face going very still, the way water goes still when the wind stops. A woman recalculating. Curtis had risen halfway out of his chair. His hands were flat on the table. He was looking at me the way he had looked at me the morning I told the family I was enlisting, with the expression of a man who sees more than he says and is finally being forced to say it. Damon had not moved. Both hands were on the podium now. He was holding it the way a person holds something when they need to stay upright. I stopped at the foot of the podium steps. The room was absolutely silent. I looked up at my brother. He looked down at me. 12 years of distance. 10 years of a lie. 200 people holding their breath between us. I said calmly and clearly, so that every person in that room could hear me without effort. My name is Kezia Washington, Sergeant First Class United States Army retired. I'm not dead. I never was. And I think there are some things this room deserves to hear directly from me. The room didn't make a sound. 200 people. Complete silence. And for the first time in my life, every single one of them was looking at me. I did not raise my voice. That was the first thing I had decided weeks before February 14th, sitting in a plastic hospital chair at 11 at night with the sound of Big Mama Odessa's monitor through the door. I had seen enough of what rage looked like in difficult rooms, the way it gave the other person something to react to, something to manage, something to redirect attention toward. I was not going to give Damon that. I was not going to give any of them that. I spoke at a normal volume, even, unhurried. 10 years ago, I enlisted in the United States Army because my family could not or would not help me close a $3,000 gap in my college financial aid package. I looked out at the room, not at Damon, at the 200 people who had come here to honor a man built partly on my name. I want to be clear. I am not here to relitigate that decision. I made my peace with it a long time ago. What I am here to address is something different. I turned and looked at Damon directly. My brother has been telling people I died in combat since approximately 2015, at church fundraisers, at campaign events, in print interviews, in this room just now in front of all of you. I paused. I have been alive this entire time. I completed 2 deployments. I was promoted to Sergeant First Class. I received a Bronze Star for actions in Kandahar Province in 2017. I let that land for 1 full second. No one in my family knew about the Bronze Star, because no one in my family ever asked how I was doing. Not once in 10 years. The silence in the room had texture now. It was not the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence of 200 people recalibrating, reassessing every story they had been told, every applause line they had responded to, every donation check written in the name of a fallen soldier who was standing in front of them in full dress uniform. Damon moved then. He stepped back from the podium, not dramatically, just a small retreat, the way a person steps back from something hot. Kezia! His voice was careful, controlled, the voice of a man who had spent years learning how to manage rooms. You thought what, Damon? I kept my voice level, that I was gone or that I wouldn't come back. His jaw tightened. He looked briefly at the audience, then back at me. The calculation was visible how to reframe this, how to find the angle, how to make the room understand that what they were seeing was somehow a misunderstanding rather than exactly what it was. He said, I was grieving. I didn't know. You received my text messages. I said, you received calls from Big Mama Odessa telling you I was alive. You saw my Facebook comments when people posted condolences on my page. You had access to every piece of information that would have told you I was not dead. I stopped. You chose not to use it. The room shifted. Not loudly. Just a murmur-low collective, the sound of 200 people absorbing something they could not unhear. Councilwoman Yvette Chambers stood up. She was a composed woman. Late 50s, natural silver locks, the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where things went sideways and had learned to respond rather than react. She looked at me with an expression that was not hostile and not performatively sympathetic, just direct. "Mrs. Washington," she said. "Sergeant Washington," a slight correction offered with respect. "Can you tell this room what you need from us today?" I appreciated that question more than I could say in the moment. It was the right question. It cut past the drama of the situation and asked for something actionable. I held up the manila envelope. "I have documentation," I said. "My military records, my deployment history, my discharge papers, and a record of every public statement my brother has made using my name and my photograph without my knowledge or consent, including campaign materials that used an image of me in uniform taken from my personal social media page." I walked to Councilwoman Chambers' table and set the envelope down in front of her. "I'm not asking for anything today except for this room to know the truth. What you do with that truth is your decision." Councilwoman Chambers looked at the envelope. She did not open it immediately. She looked up at Damon. Damon said nothing. Rochelle stood up then. She moved quickly, the efficient, purposeful movement of a woman who has decided that containment is still possible if she acts fast enough. She came to the foot of the podium steps and looked at me with an expression I recognized from childhood. The expression that preceded this is not the place, this is not the time, you are making a scene. Kezia. Her voice was low, controlled. "This is not the place." I looked at her, calmly, without anger and without apology. "You gave an interview to the Houston Chronicle 4 days ago," I said, "about keeping my memory alive. I read it at a McDonald's on Ella Boulevard, alone, while I was very much alive and had been in this city for 2 weeks. I held her gaze. "So tell me, Mama, where exactly is the right place?" Rochelle's mouth opened slightly, then closed. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen my mother not have an answer ready. Curtis had not stood. He was still at the table, both hands flat on the surface in front of him, looking at me with the expression of a man who has been waiting a very long time for a reckoning he knew was coming and does not know what to do now that it has arrived. I looked at my father for a moment. Just a moment. "Curtis," my voice softened not much but enough. "I know you saw what was happening. I know you understood." I paused. "I needed you to say something. Even once." Curtis looked down at his hands. That was all. That was enough. Damon spoke then from the podium, still gripping its edges, his polished composure stripped down to something rawer and quieter underneath. "I'm sorry." 2 words, barely audible. Meant perhaps for me, or perhaps for the room, or perhaps for the version of himself that had believed he could build something lasting on a foundation of someone else's absence. I heard them. I did not perform forgiveness I did not yet feel. I did not tell him it was fine. I did not give the room the resolution it wanted, the tearful embrace the family made whole in public, the story tidied into something comfortable before the appetizers were cleared. I turned to face Councilwoman Chambers one last time. "I'm not here to destroy my brother," I said. "I'm here because my grandmother asked me to show up, and because I spent 30 years being made invisible in a story I didn't write, and I owe it to myself to stop being a ghost." I looked at the room, all of it, all 200 faces, every pair of eyes that had turned toward me when I walked through those doors. The people in this room deserved to know who they were actually honoring. Now you do. I turned. Terrence fell into step beside me without a word. We walked back up the center aisle the way we had come, steady, even unhurried. The room was still quiet. I heard someone begin to clap, a single person somewhere in the middle section. Then another. Then a few more, not a standing ovation. Not the thunderous applause Damon had received 20 minutes earlier. Just a small, genuine sound from people who had witnessed something true and felt the need to acknowledge it. I did not look back. I walked out of that room the same way I had walked in, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward it. Big Mama Odessa died on a Tuesday morning in April. It was 6:17 in the morning. The light was just beginning to come through the blinds in her hospital room. That particular early April light in Houston, warm and slightly golden, the kind that makes everything look briefly like it has been forgiven. I was in the chair beside her bed. I had been there since 4 in the morning, when the night nurse called and said quietly and without drama that I should come. I held her hand when she went. Her grip had been loosening for weeks. But even in those last hours, there was something intentional in it. Not strength exactly, but presence. She was there until she wasn't, and the difference between those two states was so small and so complete that I sat with it for a long time before I called anyone. The funeral was held the following Saturday at Antioch Missionary Baptist Church on West Little York Road, the same church Big Mama Odessa had attended for 47 years, the same church where she had been baptized as a young woman and where she had sat in the third pew from the front every single Sunday without exception. The sanctuary held 300 people, and it was full. People from 3rd Ward, from Acres Homes, from Beaumont and Port Arthur and Dallas, who had made the drive. People who had known her for decades, and people who had known her only a little and had come anyway. Because some people leave a gravity behind them that pulls you toward their going, even if you can't fully explain why. I sat in the front pew. For the first time in my life at a Washington family gathering. My name was called first. The associate pastor, a young man named Reverend Dwight O.C., who had clearly loved Big Mama Odessa, in the uncomplicated way of someone who had received only kindness from her, looked out at the congregation before the service began and said, "We want to especially welcome Celestine's granddaughter, Kezia Washington, the soldier she raised, the one she never stopped praying for." 300 people looked at me. I did not look away. I did not make myself small. I sat in that front pew in my civilian clothes, a simple black dress, nothing elaborate, and I received it. The acknowledgement, the witness, the thing I had been waiting for my entire life without knowing that was what I was waiting for. I did not cry in the sanctuary. I cried later alone in the house on Acorn Creek Drive that was now mine, sitting on the back porch in the early evening with the peach tree Big Mama Odessa had planted 30 years ago, casting its shadow across the yard, and the sound of the neighborhood settling into itself around me, and the particular silence of a place that is waiting to see what you will do with it. I stayed on that porch for a long time. 3 months after the funeral, I moved to Atlanta. Old 4th Ward, a neighborhood whose history I had studied before I signed the lease, the same way I had studied everything that mattered to me carefully, alone with the full weight of my attention. Martin Luther King Jr. had grown up 2 miles from my apartment. John Lewis had marched through streets I now drove on my way to work. The neighborhood had the particular quality of places that have survived their own erasure and come back as something more deliberately themselves. I started my position at Lockheed Martin's Defense Contracting Division in March, and cybersecurity systems, integrity, the kind of work that used everything the Army had built in me and paid $85,000 a year to use it. My manager, a precise and generous woman named Dr. Amara Osei, told me in my first week that I was the most organized analyst she had hired in 6 years. I thanked her and did not explain that I had learned organization in the Army and had learned thoroughness from a grandmother who kept a manila folder for 8 years because she believed the truth needed witnesses. I did not tell my family I had moved to Atlanta, not immediately. I let the distance establish itself first, let it become a fact before it became a conversation. Jade Ellison's article in the Houston Defender ran on February 20th, 6 days after the ceremony. It was not the article I had feared, not a sensationalized account of a family's public collapse, not a piece designed to extract maximum humiliation from Damon's exposure. Jade was a better journalist than that. The article was precise and measured and devastating in the way that only accurate things can be. It told the story of a woman who had served 10 years, earned a Bronze Star, and come home to find her name on a monument to a lie. It included my military records. It included the documented timeline of Damon's public statements. It included a photograph taken by Jade herself at City Hall of Terrence, and me walking down the center aisle in our dress uniforms, while 200 people turned to watch. It was the most widely read article the Houston Defender had published in 4 years. Councilwoman Chambers opened a formal review, into the use of military imagery and personal identity in Damon's campaign and promotional materials. The review did not result in criminal charges. The legal threshold for that was narrow, and Damon's attorney was competent, but it resulted in something that may have been more damaging to a man of Damon's particular ambitions: a public record, a documented finding, a permanent notation in the city's administrative files that his conduct had warranted investigation. His campaign for the district advisory board seat was suspended. The announcement came through a statement issued by his office that used the phrase "stepping back to focus on family matters." I read it on my phone in my Atlanta apartment and felt nothing dramatic, just the quiet recognition of cause and effect working as it should. Rochelle called me once in May. I was sitting on my apartment balcony in Old Fourth Ward when my phone rang. I looked at her name on the screen for a long moment before I answered. "Kezia." Her voice was neutral, careful. "Mama?" A pause. I did not fill it. "I saw the article," she said finally. "In the Defender." "I know." Another pause. I could hear her breathing, the slightly measured quality of a woman choosing her words with more care than usual. "Are you happy now?" she asked. It was not the question I had expected. It was not an apology. It was not an acknowledgement of what had been done or not done across 31 years. It was the question of a woman who had decided that the most she could offer was the minimum and was offering it. I thought about the answer honestly, the way Big Mama Odessa had always asked me to think about things without performance, without the answer I was supposed to give. "I'm working on it," I said. "All right." A beat. "You staying safe?" "Yes." "All right," she said again. She hung up first. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment, looking out over the Atlanta skyline, and then I set it down and picked up my coffee and watched the evening come in over the city. I sent Curtis a card on Father's Day. A simple one, no long message, just my name signed at the bottom. He sent a text back 3 days later. "Thank you, Kezia girl. I'm proud of you." 4 words I had waited my whole life to receive, arriving quietly, and 6 months too late, and meaning something anyway. I did not attend the family reunion that summer. I was not invited, and I did not invite myself. I sent Big Mama Odessa's pepper jelly recipe, handwritten on good paper, to my cousin Tanya, who had once sent me a condolence message for a death that hadn't happened. She texted back a string of heart emojis and a message that said, "We miss you at the table cushions." I read it twice. I put my phone down. I thought about it for a few days. Then I wrote back, "I'll think about next year." And I meant it. Not as forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever in the complete way that word usually implies, but as possibility, as the acknowledgement that I was still here, still building, still deciding what kind of woman I was going to be with the years I had left, and that the decision belonged entirely to me. The house on Acorn Creek Drive is still mine. I have not sold it. I have a property manager who looks after it, a woman from the neighborhood named Mrs. Gloria Webb, who knew Big Mama Odessa for 30 years and who texts me photographs of the peach tree every summer when it blooms. I look at those photographs sometimes in my Atlanta apartment and feel something I am still learning the name for, something between grief and gratitude, something that feels more and more like home. I go back to Houston twice a year. I visit the house. I sit on the back porch. I look at the yard Big Mama Odessa tended for 5 decades, and I think about what she said to me the last time I saw her conscious, the last real conversation 3 days before the end, when she had looked at me with those sharp, clear eyes and asked, "You ready?" I had said yes. I am still becoming it. That is enough. You can love someone and still refuse to be buried by them. You don't owe anyone, not a brother, not a mother, not a family, the right to build their legacy on your silence. Show up. Stand whole. That is the only victory that lasts. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to reclaim your own name from someone who tried to erase you? How did you find your way back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, check out the video in the description. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.